When I put together this class, I took the ideas from positive psychology, from the science of happiness, that I thought would have made the most difference in my life when I was a student. You know, when I started teaching that course, it was very far from being the most popular. In fact, I had 8 students. 2 of them dropped out, which left me with 6 and a bruised ego. The following year, the class grew somewhat already to over 300 students. And then the third year, when I taught it, there were close to 900 students at that time, becoming the most popular class. And the reason why it grew was because students at the end of the year write comments about the class. And the class was evaluated as a good class, but then they have a question, which is there anything else that you want to add about this class? And many of the students wrote this sentence. They wrote, "This class changed my life." We're looking to becoming happy. You know, Aristotle talked about it thousands of years ago. The Dalai Lama talked about it a few years ago, about how our goal, our objective is to lead happier, more fulfilled lives. Many people wondered why my class was more popular than Introduction to Economics, which had been the most popular class until then. And the answer is because more people want to be happy than want to be rich. Happiness is a little bit like beauty. You know it when you see it, or you know it when you experience it. When it comes to happiness, the way I define it, and the way many people define it, is the combination between meaning and pleasure. So, for example, let's say I'm in a relationship and I enjoy my time with my partner. It's pleasurable to be together overall, with the ups and downs, of course. And I find the relationship meaningful, whether it's meaningful spending time together, whether it's meaningful creating a family together. When I have both meaning and pleasure, it's a happier relationship. Same applies to work. You know, if I'm in a workplace and overall enjoy going to work in the morning and find my work overall meaningful, I find a sense of purpose there, then it's a happy workplace. It's important to note, though, that happiness is not a constant high. There are ups and downs, and that's natural. And it's important to accept that, because one of the misconceptions that people have about happiness is that I'm only happy if I'm happy all the time, or I'm only happy if I don't experience painful emotions. That's unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, not true. Well, the first thing when you have downs is you accept them. You recognize that it's part of human nature. You know, the first year when I taught my class on positive psychology, one of the Harvard students came over, and I was having lunch, and said, "Can I join you?" And I said, "Sure." And then he said to me, "Tal, I hear you're teaching a class on happiness." And I said, "Yeah, I'm teaching positive psychology." And then he said, "You know, Tal, my roommates are taking your class." And I said, "That's great." But he said, "Now, Tal, you've got to watch out now that you're teaching this class." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "You've got to be careful." And I said, "How come?" And he said, "Because if I see you unhappy, I'll tell my roommates." And I actually used that in class the following day, and I told my students, you know, the last thing I want you to think is that I'm always happy, or that you, by the end of the year, it was a year-long course, will always be happy. You know, there are only 2 kinds of people who don't experience painful emotions like anger or sadness or disappointment or envy or anxiety. 2 kinds of people who don't experience these emotions, and they are the psychopaths and dead people. So, you know, if we experience painful emotions at times, it's actually a good sign. It means, you know, we're alive and we're not psychopaths. You know, we can work with that. So the first thing we need to do when we experience painful emotions is to accept them, to give ourselves the permission to be human. Because paradoxically, when we don't accept them, when we chastise ourselves or criticize ourselves for experiencing painful emotions, these emotions actually strengthen. In contrast, and this is the paradox, when we accept the painful emotions, when we give ourselves that permission to be human, these emotions actually subside, they actually weaken, they actually eventually go away, they pass. So the first thing to do when we experience painful emotions is acceptance. When I was starting off on my path, searching for happiness, I wanted to have it all. I wanted to continue working hard, which meant 14 hours a day sometimes. I wanted to continue doing sports, 3 hours a day, including yoga and the gym. I wanted to spend time with my partner, going on dates together. And I also wanted to spend a lot of time with friends. But the problem is, when I added all this up, it was more like 48 hours rather than 24 hours a day. Unfortunately, the Earth revolves at the same speed around the sun, can't get any more hours in a day. And this was especially stressful as soon as I had kids, because suddenly they come in, they're very demanding of your time, and I wanted to spend time with them. And I realized that I couldn't have it all. And I experienced constant frustration, so when I was going to work, I was thinking, well, I'm not spending enough time with the kids. When I was with the kids, I was saying, why don't my wife and I have more time together? Why aren't we spending more time with friends? Why am I not exercising? Or when I was exercising, I was feeling guilty about not being at work or with my family. So it was an experience of constant frustration. And then I remember one day reading Donald Winnicott, who's a child psychologist, and one of his main ideas is he talks about the good enough mother. And he talked at a time when mothers took care of children, but I said, this is 21st century, what about a good enough father as well? And this idea of good enough really stuck, not just in the context of raising children, that you don't need to be a perfect parent, but in the context of life as a whole. And I said, instead of trying to lead a perfect life, not perfect, but good enough, and I came up with a much saner, more reasonable structure for my life. And when I embraced the good enough approach, what happened was that even though it wasn't perfect, the frustration dissipated, went away, and I experienced a lot more satisfaction with my life. Because if you really think about it, good enough is good enough. And we're not helping ourselves or other people in our lives when we strive for the perfect, for the ideal. We're helping ourselves and others when we accept good enough for what it is. One of the things that we see in our culture today is that people fail to experience happiness because they're constantly on the run. Never in history have we had so much potential happiness. There is a misconception that people have that material wealth will make us happiness, that financial affluence will make us happier. But it won't. Time affluence does make us happier. Not material affluence, but time affluence. Now, what's time affluence? It's simply the feeling that we have time. Parents, especially, are so concerned today about quality time. But they don't realize that what kids need, even more than quality time, is time to just hang out. It's the same Shirley, whom I called, gives her kids time where they do nothing, and sometimes they would say to her, "But Mom, I'm bored." And she would say to him, "That's okay, sweetheart, be bored with dignity." And I think this is so important for kids to, just be bored, just have free time. And not just for kids, in organizations as well. What you find, the best ideas for leaders come when they actually are doing nothing. We need to think about creativity, not just productivity. And if we want to create, we need to also recreate. One of the most difficult things we all have to deal with is failure, disappointment, loss, which we all experience. I had a few over the years, and they came in different shapes and forms. The first one actually came after maybe the highest high of my life, at least until that time. It was the first time I was, I'm originally from Israel. I was a squash player, a professional squash player. And I remember for years my dream was to win the Israeli national championships in squash. And for a long time as a kid, I was not a happy kid. I was a motivated kid, I was a successful kid, in school, in sports, but I wasn't a happy kid. But I always told myself, when I win the championship, then I'll be happy, because then all the hard work, the miles that I ran, the hours and hours that I would hit the ball up and down the wall, that would all pay off. No pain, no gain. And then I won, and I experienced the most incredible high. I mean, I remember that sensation of winning the game, lifting the trophy. It was a dream come true, and I was ecstatic. And I thought, okay, now I'm ready to be happy. I have it all. I'm not kidding. It took 4 hours for the high to turn into this most incredible low. Tears and pain, because I realized that this wasn't it, and I was baffled. I was disappointed. I was scared. I've trained so many years just for this moment, thinking that this will be, my savior. This will take me from the state of unhappiness to happiness, and it didn't. Now the thing about the slow, it didn't go away. It remained there for days and weeks and months. And that was actually a turning point. That's when I decided that I have to do something about it. I have to figure out, if success is not the answer, if that's not the formula to attaining happiness, what is? Another one, which was purely a low experience, probably the most difficult experience of my life, is losing my closest friend in a plane crash. From that moment, there was real pain, but also real growth. I remember the first time I smiled after the accident. It happened maybe 7 or 8 weeks after. I was crying for days on days, and experiencing the deepest of sorrows. And then the first time I smiled was when I was teaching. And remember, this man and woman who were in my workshop came to me after. It was a 3-day workshop. It was on the 3rd day, they said to me, last night we talked about what we went through here, and we really felt that our relationship, as we were talking, was improving and growing. And that brought home to me this idea that the most direct and powerful path to happiness is giving, is a sense of making a difference in other people's lives. Because when they told me, you made a difference in our lives, that's when I reconnected to purpose. My first answer to that is that I don't always live in tranquility and peace. About a year ago, one of the businesses that I helped found failed miserably. I remember going home that evening, and Tammy, my wife, came over to me, and she puts her hand on my shoulder, seeing how sad I was. And then she said to me, "Tal, I'm going to ask you a question which may be off topic, but I think it's important." And she asked me, "Tal, do your students know just how often you fail?" And I said to her, I don't think so. And this was another one of those moments when I realized it's important that they know that. And ever since then I started sharing more of the failures, because what my students see is me standing in front of them, looking confident. They have read my books. All looks great. They know I have a lovely family, and things look terrific. But there are difficulties and hardships, and it's important that they know that. There are many leaders who are misinformed about the role of a leader, and yet there is a growing group of leaders who understand the real meaning of leadership. One of the groups that I very much admire, and they talk about conscious capitalism. They ask, how is it that a movement that has liberated so many people from oppression, from poverty, that has brought about so much progress, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in the arts. How is it that such a movement is vilified, is hated by so many people around the world? And they talk about, John McKee talks about in his book, Conscious Capitalism, about how, some capitalists have earned this hatred by doing the wrong things, but also they haven't truly understood what capitalism is about. That it needs to include thinking not just about the shareholders. It needs to think about the stakeholders. It needs to think about the environment. It needs to think about the clients. It needs to think about society as a whole, about community, and about the shareholders as well, about the employees. It needs to think about everyone. That's what great leadership is about. It's about going back to Peter Senge's work. It's about looking at the whole system, not just about the quarterly reports. In the long term, it's possible to attain a win-win-win solution, because in the long term, the most successful business will take care of the environment, will take care of the community, will take care of customers, will take care of ultimately the shareholders as well. But that's when we expand our perspective to think holistically, not just in terms of place, but also in terms of time. It's about expanding our horizons. On average, religious people are happier than non-religious people. Now, the interesting question for scientists is why? So first of all, in religion, there's a lot of gratitude. So, every day you say thank you for your daily bread, or you say thank you for this miraculous world. You appreciate. Second, religion creates a community. Whether it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday community, whether it's a general community that you're a part of. Religion also has rituals, healthy rituals, such as the family get-together or the community get-together. Religion also provides a sense of meaning and purpose. Now, having said all these things, even if we do not believe and subscribe to a particular religion, we can still learn a great deal from it. Levels of empathy have gone down radically over the last 20 years, radically. So 20-year-olds today are a lot less empathic toward other people than 20-year-olds were a generation ago. The main reason is because of technology. Because if you think about it, how does empathy develop? Empathy develops when we play in the sand together, when we hang out together. When I, as a little kid, hurt someone and I see them cry, and then I feel for them. Or, someone hurts me and I know what it feels like to be hurt. This is how empathy develops. However, if we're mostly online, we don't see the reactions of the other person. And then we can write terrible things in talkbacks online or in Facebook, and we lose the sensitivity that we naturally develop when we hang out together. That's one of the very troubling consequences of relying too much on technology, lower empathy, because empathy is the foundation of morality. It's the foundation of a healthy society. And when you look at the happiest countries in the world, there are not the countries that you would expect to find. Australia, Denmark, Israel, Colombia, Costa Rica. Why these countries and not other countries like the US or the UK or Germany or Singapore? I mean, these are very wealthy countries, very advanced. Why aren't they at the top? So these countries were doing okay, but the one thing, the distinguishing characteristic among the happiest countries in the world was focus on relationships, on real relationships. It's not that I'm against technology. I think technology is great. My sister met her husband online, and they have an incredible relationship. But as Aristotle said, everything in moderation. And today we've lost moderation when it comes to technology. It's taking over our lives. Sometimes thinking can actually hurt happiness. You know, Socrates, father of Western philosophy, said the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, over the years I've come to realize that the over-examined life can be tedious. So, you know, overthinking is also a problem. And that's, by the way, a problem that very often psychologists or philosophers would face. The keys to happiness are not that complicated. You know, it's no rocket science. It's actually quite simple. It's going back to basics. It's spending time with people we care about and who care about us. It's exercising on a regular basis. That's very important. It's doing things in moderation, whether in terms of eating in moderation, whether in terms of technology in moderation. It's about appreciating. People who write down or visualize things for which they're grateful, whether every day before going to bed or even once a week, they're happier, they're more optimistic, they're more successful, they're more generous and kind toward other people, and they're physically healthier, so it actually strengthens their immune system. You know, so it's expressing gratitude. Again, no rocket science. We know we need to be grateful and not only appreciate things when we lose them, appreciate on a daily basis. You know, take a deep breath. Again, that's a pathway to a happier life. So it's doing all these simple things, but doing them as a ritual on a regular basis. These are the keys to happiness. Thank you for all the great work that you do.